Welcome to Catholic News World.
Welcome to Catholic News World. Please subscribe to our channel. My name is Steph. Here are this week's breaking news headlines.
Brother Godwin Ease, one of the 3 Benedictine monks kidnapped by an armed gang on the night of October 17th in the Iruku Monastery of Kwara State, in central northern Nigeria, was brutally killed. The other 2 postulants, Anthony Ease and Peter Olerwaj, were set free on October 21st. Brother Godwin Ease was killed on October 18th, the day after the kidnapping. The religious reported in an interview with Fides, they broke into the novitiate dormitories and after threatening those present, kidnapped Brother Ease and the 2 postulants, who were forced to walk barefoot through the forest. At dawn, when they reached a river bank, Brother Ease was shot and his body thrown into the river, according to the 2 postulants. The kidnappers said this was to show their determination and how serious they were. His fellow brothers described 31-year-old Brother Ease as a cheerful person who devoted himself entirely to the monastery and prayer. His body is still missing. The 2 postulants are in the hospital, where they are being treated for the wounds they sustained during the day-long walk through the forest and to recover from the psychological trauma they have suffered, the Benedictines continued. The armed group, described as a band of Fulani, attacked the dormitory of the novitiate of the convent, where about 10 brothers, including novices and postulants, were sleeping around 1 in the morning, on October 17th. The bandits then threatened the 2 postulants with machetes, claiming that they were looking for money. When they freed them, it is not known whether a ransom was paid. The Vatican's Archbishop Caccia and the UN's Antonio Guterres call for 2-state solution, ceasefire, and flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza at the United Nations Security Council meeting. Speaking at the United Nations Security Council, in New York, on the war ravaging the Holy Land, the permanent observer of the Holy See, Archbishop Gabriel Caccia, urged Israeli and Palestinian authorities to show courage for peace by agreeing to work for the 2-state solution. Archbishop Caccia, citing Pope Francis, said, "Terrorism and extremism fuel hatred, violence and revenge and only cause mutual suffering." He also reiterated the call of Pope Francis for the immediate release of all hostages held in Gaza, stressing that the right to self-defense in every conflict must comply with international law and the principle of proportionality. Expressing concern about the unfolding humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip, he emphasized that the total siege imposed on that territory has caused indiscriminate suffering. In this regard, he called for enabling humanitarian corridors to ensure that aid can reach the Palestinian people. While the path of dialogue appears narrow at present, it is the only viable option for a lasting end to the cycle of violence that has engulfed that land, so dear to Christians, Jews and Muslims, he emphasized. The situation in the Middle East grows more dire by the hour, with the war in Gaza raging and risking spiraling throughout the region. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned the Security Council, calling for humanitarian aid without restrictions and an immediate ceasefire. At a crucial moment like this, it is vital to be clear on principles, starting with the fundamental principle of respecting and protecting civilians, Secretary-General Guterres said, during a day-long ministerial debate on the Palestinian question, amid an escalation of Israel's military offensive in Gaza. Nothing can justify the deliberate killing, injuring, and kidnapping of civilians, or the launching of rockets against civilian targets. Recalling his unequivocal condemnation of the horrifying and unprecedented October 7th acts of terror by Hamas in Israel, he called for the immediate release of the hostages. As well, he stressed the need for humanitarian aid to be delivered without restrictions, adding, to ease epic suffering, make the delivery of aid easier and safer, and facilitate the release of hostages, I reiterate my appeal for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. The attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum, he noted, with the Palestinian people being subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation, during which they saw their land devoured by settlements, their economy stifled, their homes demolished, and their hopes for a political solution vanishing. However, the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas. And those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people, he said, emphasizing, even war has rules. At this critical hour, he appealed to everyone to pull back from the brink before the violence claims even more lives and spreads even farther. More than 1,400 Israelis and foreign nationals were killed, and 220 civilians, including women and children, as well as soldiers, were taken into Gaza as hostages. On that day, Israel's security cabinet declared a state of war, with its forces commencing a massive bombardment of what they said were Hamas sites throughout Gaza, targeting some 5,000 locations. On October 8, Israel's Minister for Defense announced a complete siege of Gaza, blocking all entry of goods, including electricity, water, food, and fuel. He outlined the devastating impact of Israel's ongoing airstrikes, with Gaza's Ministry of Health reporting more than 5,000 Palestinians killed, including over 1,100 women and 2,000 children, as well as journalists, medical workers, and first responders. 1 million Palestinians have been displaced, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, and United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, schools and hospitals, many sheltering displaced Palestinians, having been hit. Warning of a significant risk of a regional spillover, with the already worrying violence in the occupied West Bank having increased since the outbreak of war, he stressed the need to advance a negotiated peace that fulfills the long-held vision of two states, in line with UN resolutions, international law, and previous agreements. Pope Francis issued a call for all believers to join in prayer, penance, and fasting for peace on October 27. The Pope held a prayer hour at the Vatican's Basilica of St. Peter on Friday. Hundreds joined to pray with Pope Francis for peace in the world. The prayer vigil with the faithful included a rosary and Eucharistic adoration. He asked Mary to bring peace and strength to all who are victims of war in any way. After the Pope's plea, the choir sang the Eucharistic song Ostia Divina as the faithful continued to pray for peace in the Middle East. Pope Francis consecrated the Church and the world, amid wars, to Our Lady, Queen of Peace at the prayer vigil. The Pope prayed, "Maria, look at us. We are here in front of you. You are Mother, you know our struggles and our wounds. You, Queen of Peace, suffer with us and for us, seeing so many of your children tested by conflicts, distressed by the wars that tear the world apart. And in this dark hour, we immerse ourselves in your bright eyes, and we rely on your heart, sensitive to our problems. It was not free from anxieties and fears. How much apprehension when there was no room for Jesus in the lodging, how much fear when you fled to Egypt in a hurry because Herod wanted to kill him, how much anguish when you lost him in the temple. But, Mother, in trials you were courageous, you were bold, you trusted in God and responded to apprehension with care, to fear with love, to anguish with offering. It's a dark hour. This is a dark hour, Mother. Turn your gaze of mercy on the human family, which has lost the path to peace, which has preferred Cain to Abel and, losing the sense of brotherhood, cannot find the atmosphere of home again. Intercede for our world in danger and turmoil. Teach us to welcome and care for life, every human life. And to repudiate the madness of war, which sows death and erases the future. Mary, many times you have come to meet me, asking for prayer and penance. We, however, taken by our needs and distracted by many worldly interests, have been deaf to your invitations. But you, who love us, do not get tired of us, Mother. Take us by the hand. Take us by the hand and guide us to conversion. Let us put God first. Help us to safeguard unity in the Church and to be artisans of communion in the world. Remind us of the importance of our role, make us feel responsible for peace, called to pray and adore, to intercede and make amends for the entire human race. Dry the children's tears, they cry a lot at this time. Assist those who are alone and elderly, support the wounded and the sick, protect those who have had to leave their homeland and their dearest loved ones, console the disheartened, reawaken hope. On the afternoon of October 22, Pope Francis phoned the President of the United States, Joe Biden. The call lasted approximately 20 minutes. The Vatican press office made this known, explaining that the conversation, which lasted about 20 minutes, focused on conflict situations in the world and the need to identify paths to peace. The president condemned the attack by Hamas against Israeli civilians and affirmed the need to protect civilians in Gaza. He discussed his efforts to ensure delivery of food, medicine, and other humanitarian assistance to help alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They also discussed the need to prevent escalation in the region and to work toward a durable peace in the Middle East. Pope Francis also held a telephone conversation with Recep Tayyip Erdogan, president of Turkey, to discuss the dramatic situation in the Holy Land. The director of the Holy See press office, Matteo Bruni, confirmed that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan made the request and spoke on the phone with Pope Francis on October 26. The Pope expressed his sorrow for what is happening and recalled the Holy See's position, voicing his hopes that a two-state solution and a special statute for the city of Jerusalem could be reached. Mr. Bruni stated. The Turkish government had made it known in the morning that the president had expressed great concern to the Pope about what is happening in Gaza. The patriarchs and heads of the churches in Jerusalem, along with the leader of the Anglican Church, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, have issued a joint statement to condemn Israeli airstrikes that hit near St. Porphyrios Greek Orthodox Church in Gaza. The attack resulted in the deaths of 18 people, 9 of whom were children, and left many more injured. They wrote, Jerusalem's Christian spiritual leaders host the Archbishop of Canterbury and collectively call for restraint, de-escalation of violence, and protection of civilians. We, the patriarchs and heads of the churches in Jerusalem, having gathered in prayer with Jerusalem's honorable guest, the Most Reverend Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, join with him in expressing, in the strongest possible terms, our condemnation of the Israeli airstrikes that exploded without warning at the Orthodox Church compound of St. Porphyrios in Gaza on the night of October 19. These blasts led to the sudden and catastrophic collapse of 2 church halls around the scores of refugees, including women and children, sleeping within. Dozens found themselves instantly crushed beneath the rubble. Many were injured, some severely. At last count, 18 have died, 9 of whom were children. In condemning this attack against a sacred place of refuge, we cannot ignore that this is but the latest instance of innocent civilians being injured or killed as a result of missile strikes against other shelters of last resort. Among these are schools and hospitals where refugees had fled because their homes were demolished in the relentless bombing campaign waged against residential areas in Gaza over the past 2 weeks. Despite the devastation wrought upon our own and other social, religious, and humanitarian institutions, we, the patriarchs and heads of the churches, nevertheless remain fully committed to fulfilling our sacred and moral duty of offering assistance, support, and refuge to those civilians who come to us in such desperate need. Even in the face of ceaseless military demands to evacuate our charitable institutions and houses of worship, we will not abandon this Christian mission, for there is literally no other safe place for these innocents to turn. As the above passage of Scripture reminds us, our Lord Jesus Christ calls us to minister to the most vulnerable. And we must do so not only in times of peace. The Church must especially act as the Church in times of war, for that is when human suffering is at its greatest. Yet we cannot accomplish this mission alone. We therefore call upon the international community to immediately enforce protections in Gaza for sanctuaries of refuge, such as hospitals, schools, and houses of worship. And we call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire so that food, water, and vital medical supplies can safely be delivered to the relief agencies ministering to the hundreds of thousands of displaced civilians in Gaza, including those operated by our own churches. Finally, we call upon all warring parties to de-escalate the violence, cease from indiscriminately targeting civilians on all sides, and operate within the international rules of warfare. Only in this way, we believe, can the groundwork be laid for an eventual diplomatic consideration of long-standing grievances so that a just and lasting peace can finally be achieved throughout our beloved Holy Land, both in our time and for generations to come. In an interview, reported by Vatican News, Catholic Patriarch of Jerusalem, Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, said, "We fear for the lives of the 500 refugees at the Latin parish of Gaza." The Cardinal expressed concern for the Catholic Church in Gaza, which is housing hundreds of refugees. The Cardinal also spoke in sadness of the bombing of the Orthodox Church's compound, which resulted in the deaths of 18 Christians. He noted that many of them have now sought refuge at the Catholic parish, thus, increasing the number of refugees to 700. He said, "Bombings and war never end problems, they only complicate them." The Cardinal explained that the refugees feel that no place is safe for them along the Gaza Strip and that they have no place to go. But they trust in God and pray. The Catholic parish of the Holy Family in Gaza celebrates Holy Mass, Rosary, and Eucharistic adoration daily. There are 3 groups of nuns who attend the parish and help the parishioners. The Gaza death toll from October 7th to the 26th is at 7,028 Palestinians killed, including 2,913 children. The ministry said the actual number of dead is likely to be much higher than stated in the report. The death toll in Israel: about 1,400 people killed with just over 200 taken hostage.
Watch our programme every Friday at 7:30 p.m. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to Catholic News World channel. God bless.
Please subscribe to Catholic News World's YouTube channel. Thanks and God bless.